Let's talk about morning routines. Let's talk about some stuff going on. Let's talk about what I call max truth, which is pretty much the fundamental truth of human existence. I had this idea for a program. I'm still going to do it eventually, but I really want 100 acres, probably in Texas somewhere, to do it and have people come out for like a week of intense living, training, learning, connecting. But I've always had this idea of a course that just encompasses everything, because I think about my life and all the different rabbit holes I've fallen into, how I came out of them more knowledgeable, how I came out of them unlearning a lot of the crap I thought I knew, and then relearning, and then going deep to find truth, and then realizing that everything everyone thinks they know is severely lacking, in some cases completely wrong. And so, some people call it taking the red pill, where you wake up and realize that the matrix is what you've been living in your whole life. It's a pretty apt metaphor. It's probably even worse than what people realize, but there's still hope there. I'm still optimistic because we still have freedom and we can move, and we have this digital world that if you plan and prepare and you think through things, you can become very, very anti-fragile, very, very safe and secure. And that's what people want. They want security. They want to look good naked. They want to feel good. They want health. They want to kind of understand things and know things. But there's a big but. They don't want to expend a ton of energy to do all that. That's why they turn to experts and gurus and whatever to do that for them. And that's fine. There's a time and place for that. And I'm all for that. I'm all for paying for shortchanging the time needed and the hard work needed to understand something. But even then, like, you get a taste of it and maybe start taking actions on it, and to really, really solidify it into habit, into routine, into knowing, you got to go deeper, right? So like, it's a stepping stone. Like, yes, you can pay a guru, or you can obviously buy books and training and courses, and that's going to get you maybe a little bit closer to truth, right? Or a little bit closer to understanding. But you still have to keep learning, researching. And this is the hard thing, because most adults don't learn. Most adults do not have an insatiable desire to learn and for knowledge. And those that do in the modern world, they win. They're winning. It just is what it is. The average person that is the sheep that wants to, and I'm not trying to say that pejoratively, most people are sheep because they're designed to be sheep. We're designed to think like the group. In the world today, that gets you into trouble because the powers that be profit from that. Whether it's corporations, crony capitalism, politicians, whether it's even just your community wanting you to act a certain way for appearances or what the hell ever, when you think like other people, when you let other people think for you and you act to appease them, you get issues. In some cases, drastic life-changing issues. Like if you listen to doctors with nutrition, and you've been doing that for 30 years, and then you have a heart attack and you die, there's no replays, there's no go-backs. So there's massive risks here. Financially, you invest in your 401k, you do what you think you're supposed to do, you buy like the stock market, whatever, and then later on you realize that it was completely manipulated and you didn't even beat inflation. You're actually poorer now than you were before. Obviously, that's simplistic. The S&P has been doing well over time, but with the inflation, they've been ramping up since 2020. When you have like a 20 to 30% inflation rate, you have to have a company that's growing at 20 to 30% a year, and you have to invest in that company just to beat inflation, just to keep up with it. That's hard to do. No big company does that. Like there's literally no, Apple, I think, grew at like, its revenues grew maybe 25% over the past few years, but the stock value grew by 200%. They went from $1 trillion company to $3 trillion company. And that's mostly because of inflation and people were using it as a store of value, blah, blah, blah. You want health, you want wealth, you want happiness, but you also want simple solutions. You want to understand things in as little effort as possible. You don't want to spend a lot of calories thinking, because evolutionarily, that wasn't an advantage. Your brain requires a lot of calories. In the wild, calories are scarce. Therefore, you don't like to think. And there's also the benefit of thinking like the group keeps you safe, because if you stick out in the group, if you have ideas that challenge the status quo, you will likely be clubbed to death, or you will be exiled, which was a death sentence in the wild. And you definitely want to get mates. You definitely want to get sex. If you became the social outcast in a hunter-gatherer setting, you'd be lucky to even be kept around. In a lot of cases, you wouldn't be kept around. So you're incentivized to think like everybody else. Your biology thinks that's the safest and best path. In the world today, it's not. In the world today, it's the path of the lemming or the sheep. What the sheep don't understand, and this is why it's such a perfect analogy, or metaphor, is that the shepherd slaughters the sheep. That's the entire goal of the shepherd tending its flock. because he uses the sheep to sell for meat and, of course, wool to some extent, but eventually to sell to slaughter. And that's what the state is to every citizen. You are simply a tax slave for as long as they can monetize you so that they can keep their power doing the things that they deem they should be doing while also lying to the public about all of it, as we've seen. Is it any surprise? You want to do all these things and you want to have all these things, but each one of them requires a deep dive. And a deep dive, I mean time and effort. Two very scarce things in your life. You want to save as much time as possible, and you want to save as much money as possible. And, I guess you could even say calories, but really time and money, that's all kind of similar things. It's just scarce resources are required. Proof of work is a perfect way to think about this. It requires proof of work, which is energy expenditure into understanding these things so that you have a high conviction level and a high understanding, and you're more likely to adhere to them. That's what you need to do. Because, for example, with Bitcoin, they say it requires 4,100 hours of study. I think at least 100. Because when you have an asset that goes from like 30,000 up to 70, and you're like, wow, I made so much money, and then it drops back down to 30. You're like, painful. Yet, what did I do? And what a lot of Bitcoin maximalists that have done the work, what do? We buy. We buy when it's at 35. We buy when it's at 40. We buy when it's at 60. And then we buy again on the way down. And we buy when it even goes below 30. In fact, if you're truly a maximalist, you're happy when it goes down because you're getting more Bitcoin for less of your fiat dollars. And that's a bargain because you understand what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years. So you're happy about it. It's still painful at times. It's still tough to swallow that. And all the drops for the past 3 years, I have not sold any of my Bitcoin. I've been buying more every single time to the point where I ran out of cash. That requires deep understanding and conviction. It requires knowing where we're at now, knowing history, and knowing where we're going. That's the only way to do that. And that's why there's so few people that bought Bitcoin at like 100 that would still have it at 30 or 50, 60K, because what you do is you buy it at 100 and then it goes to 1,000. You're like, wow, I got to cash out or I got to sell some. Very few people that were buying it at 100 were buying it because they knew that it was going to change the world, especially since it was so early. I mean, we're talking like a few years in. You just couldn't know. After 10 years, after corporate adoption, etc., it's a completely different paradigm. So always happy to hear from y'all. Send me an email, colin@wildfoods.co, and let me know any thoughts. Let me know any ideas about the course, again, if you had an all-encompassing program that got you to a baseline understanding of the first principles of health, wealth, happiness, of everything. We could even touch on relationships. But really the big things are money, financial freedom, our health, how to eat, nutrition, exercise, etc. And then life philosophy, how to think about life, how to live a good life, how to, be in the moment, not always be distracted, not give up the good things in life because you're chasing some bullshit, socially engineered, corporate engineered nonsense about what's going to actually make you happy. Usually they sell it as more stuff because you raise your status. It's all bullshit. You have to understand that. And then if you want to go after it and you can afford it, then okay, at least you understand the game you're playing. The worst thing you could do is to play that game. And that's the money game. That's the finance game. That's the health game. Playing these games because you've accepted the rules that someone else gave you and told you this is the way it is. And then realizing later on that those weren't the actual rules and it was actually a bad strategy. And now you've lost the game. That's the worst thing you can do. I've had this deep passion and I had this deep conviction that somewhere inside of me, when I do it, when it happens, when the time is right, that there is an all-encompassing program for bringing a human in. And they could be as far gone blue-pilled as possible, like mass liberal, watch the news all day, like whatever. But if they came into this program, we could spit them out with a completely different everything. And then, of course, you have people that are like a little bit in, a little bit out. They're not super aggressive into their conformity. They're maybe just like, I don't really trust the government. I don't really care either way. Those people, those probably are actually the better demographic for something like this because they still want wealth. They want financial freedom. They want health. They want happiness. They want to feel like their life has meaning, their work has meaning. Taking that person and running them through some kind of intense program, which I think it's going to have to definitely be physical because there is a disconnect in making it just a course or making it passive online or whatever, but maybe it'll start that way. But I definitely think physical. That's why I want to get 100 acres and really make it immersive. That person can come out the other end with a completely new life, a new outlook, new principles, a new mindset on everything. That's my goal. And I think it's needed. If we look at the broken, mismatched environment we have, I mean, things are really broken and people are really broken. And a lot of them probably fundamentally believe there's something wrong and they know there's things they should and shouldn't do or whatever. But there's no real thing in their life, no real nexus they can follow or guide, no real leader amongst their community, their friends, their family that is saying, yes, there is a better way. You're right. Come this way and let me show you. And I think it's needed. So let's look at a few tweets. I'll let you go. It's funny. I love how the shittiest people are against Bitcoin. You know, the World Economic Forum, the central bankers, a lot of the bureaucrats. No surprise there because it's a threat to them. Thing is, they can't do anything about it. Here's another one on guns. Joe Biden wants to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, yet Democrats refuse to prosecute violent crimes in Democrat cities all over the country and refuse to protect your children at school with armed security. Same Democrats are protected by armed guards daily. Yeah, it's rules for thee, not for, or rules for you, not for thee, or whatever the phrase is. Guns aren't the problem. They've never been the problem. Right? It just is what it is. Mexico, I believe, let's look this up. Mexico, are guns legal? Okay, so I guess people can own firearms, but they do have very restrictive laws. Wow. There's only one gun store in all of Mexico. You can have one handgun and up to 9 rifles. So in a place like that where the cartels run everything, there's not very many armed citizens. It's either very onerous or expensive and making it unable for law-abiding citizens to protect themselves. No surprise there. I won't get into this anymore because I've been covering it ad nauseum. Guns, to me, are just like anything else. If I want to do drugs, for example, drug laws are completely and utterly asinine. I never really understood that growing up. And then I started diving into economics and, anarchism, libertarianism, agorism. And I started getting an idea for like what natural rights were. And the idea that the state can tell you what you can or cannot own or buy or sell is completely and utterly a violation of natural law. And so that's how you have to think. You have to have first principles thinking. If we ban things that kill people, then we have to ban everything that kills people, if that's going to be the way it's going to be. Rather than taking some crazy person that performs an atrocity and saying, now we have to change the way of life for 300 million Americans. We have to make our country more unsafe to these people. The cops weren't even protecting the children. Now again, the cops were not protecting the children because they were afraid of getting shot. You want to make it so only the cops in the state can have firearms? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is why criminals love gun control. Because then they can break into your home and it's less likely they're going to get shot in the face. They can go out in public and shoot people and it's less likely anybody's going to defend themselves. They love it. Are you kidding me? All this does is targets law-abiding citizens that don't shoot people, that want to have the ability to feel safe and be able to protect themselves and have the ability to keep the state at bay, which is what the founding fathers meant with the Second Amendment, because they knew how dangerous the encroaching powers of any state or government are. It's just human nature. All you do is make it harder for them, make it safer for criminals who are going to get guns illegally anyways. Even if they could get it legally, they can just as easily get it illegally. A lot of times easier. It's a completely and utterly backwards narrative that makes no sense. There's tons of data around this. Thomas Sowell has an article about it. He calls it the gun control farce. In cities with the strictest gun controls, Chicago, for example, highest rates of gun violence. Imagine that. Imagine that. Like, this is, again, what I call liberal logic. Liberal logic is not logic at all. It means I'm going to ignore data and facts. I'm not going to study history. I'm going to go for what's the easiest sounding narrative. A gun killed a human wielding a gun killed people. So therefore I need to ban the thing that they use, right? But cars kill people, lots and lots of people. Airplanes kill people. They are one of the safest modes of transportation, but they still kill people. And they still will in the future. Ships kill people. Oil tankers kill people. Wood chippers kill people. Stairs kill people. I believe it's like quite a bit of people die from falling on the stairs. This idea that you can remove accidents and remove tragedies from human life in a world with 8 billion humans that's as chaotic and complex as nature is, which is what we are. Humans are products of nature, is another delusion of modern humans that bureaucrats and all their crony lobbyists and politicians, corporations that benefit from all this, it's a delusion that they incept into the minds of the public. So that every time something bad happens, the narrative becomes what is the easiest sounding thing, which is generally what the liberals want. They take a very easy narrative and they focus on that and they hawk on that and they ignore fact and reality in history. It's absurd. Minimum wage laws, for example, they literally do the opposite. They raise the rate, they kill jobs, and the people that would have got a job at $7 an hour now can't get a job at all because somebody's competing for $15 an hour that's better than them at that job. They can't level up. Countless examples of this. When the state intervenes, it removes the free market, it creates monopolies, and what it does, in most cases, it usually makes it more difficult or creates more of the thing it's trying to prevent. The war on drugs, what did that do? It actually just made drugs available everywhere. Like it's a joke. It's a literal joke. Trillions spent on the war on drugs. And drugs are more prevalent than ever. And more profitable, mind you. So that's it. I went a little bit over, so I won't go into the rest of these. Here's one to close out. $8 for a gallon of gas in California. $9 for diesel. You must buy Bitcoin. I mean, they are destroying your wealth with every dollar they print, every intervention they do. They're destroying it. That's what inflation is. Governments involved in money and markets, importing, exporting, sanctions. This is why prices happen this way, because the government gets involved and removes the free market, which the free market always makes prices come down. The government makes prices go up. This is a very simple thing. People don't understand. They literally, it's not even in their purview. They've probably never heard it in their life. Government makes prices go up. Free markets make prices go down. Why? Because free markets have competition and they want to compete. And you compete by continually lowering prices and accessing bigger markets. It's the creative destruction. It's the competition that lowers prices. Okay? A lot of people think that if the government was involved, there'd just be monopolies everywhere. There were monopolies. That was part of the building of the Industrial Revolution and building of America and the Gilded Age and all these different things. There were. But the thing is, Rockefeller, who had the largest monopoly ever, became the richest man in history, actually lowered the price of kerosene and oil because he made it available. He created an energy network. He had effective transportation means. And what he did is he lowered prices. Generally, what people think monopolies do and what governments try to protect against is if a monopoly happens, then they'll continually raise prices. So it's kind of like backwards logic. Like the first real anti-Sherman monopoly buster of Standard Oil made it so that consumers paid less for the thing that they were monopolizing, right? Again, it doesn't really make any sense. So, I mean, again, monopolies are there's a lot to it. You know, I'm not really sure how I feel about it completely. I think in the world today, you should probably let innovation happen. There will always be a way. There's just so much competition everywhere because we're a global economy now that I just don't think monopolies matter as much. But, you know, that's worth discussing and diving into another day. That's going to be it. Get the Better Human newsletter over at thebetterhuman.co, and I'll see you in the next one.